Let's go, baby. Welcome into the latest edition of Corners of the Culture. We appreciate you so much for downloading, subscribing, listening. We appreciate those that are watching over on YouTube. I'm Damian Barling. He's Kenny Caraway.
Yeah.
Adonis Dope.
Yes, indeed. TheDopeOnes.com. Make sure you check that out, man. We are so pleased that you are here with us. Again, shout out to everybody who's downloaded, subscribed, done all that stuff. Shout out to everybody who's tweeted us with different feedback on the various episodes, man. We greatly appreciate that. Of course, you can catch all of us across multiple platforms on Twitter and Instagram and so on and so forth. But we appreciate everybody checking this out as the 50 years of hip hop continue to roll on. The closer and closer we get to summer, but the hip hop world is buzzing right now because Hulu has finally started to drop their Dear Mama series, which, you know, we're 2 episodes into this and 2 of 5. And I can't speak for it's not exactly what I expected. Digging it. Not what I expected. I kind of expected a little bit more on Afeni. And I mean, again, they're doing a marvelous job of intertwining Pac and Afeni together. I thought this kind of centered a little bit more on his mom than it did on the 2 of them. But it does tell, at least two episodes in, it tells an interesting story about the 2 and how one so heavily influenced the other.
Yeah, definitely. I thought I like you, Damien. I thought it was more centered around Afeni Shakur as well. But what I am blown away by the just the way it's put together and the way that their stories are intertwined in like ways that I wasn't even aware of. Like, you know, because there's all this unearthed footage.
Yeah.
And you know, pictures from the family. And this is the first time I can ever remember his Aunt Glo talking, you know, and from her perspective, hearing things is really different because there's at least 17 documentaries on Pac out there, and I only know that because I've seen
that's
10 of them.
That's probably on the low
end. Yeah,
end
it's
too.
probably on the low end, right? So, I mean, I'm watching this, and you know, Tupac Resurrection, I thought was really well put together. That don't get a lot. It's like an underrated Tupac documentary.
It's actually better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. And so what I'm getting from Dear Mama is just a more well laid out, more cinematic approach. And I think the storytelling is better because, like you said, Damien, it is, you know, Afeni and Pac. It's like their individual stories, but then as they, you know, relate to each other, because, you know, his mom was, you know, she had a problem with crack and, you know, her history in the Panthers or whatever. But I love where it's going. I'm interested to see, you know, where it goes from here. What you think, Kenny?
Do you guys think that, like, you've seen a lot of, both of you guys, seen a bunch of Pac documentaries and are familiar with the relationship with Afeni and Pac. Do you think after 2 episodes, like, you learning something new? And it doesn't have to teach you something. I watch a lot of stuff on boxing, on music, on basketball that I know the stories. I just like reliving them. I like going through it again. And, you know, maybe there's a tidbit or here, but they're not really giving me anything revolutionary, you know, and that I didn't know. And so it doesn't have to do that. But do you think like you're learning something new from all this?
No.
That's kind
no,
of
it's but like I felt the same way. It was a question I asked a lot headed into The Last Dance. Is when we went into The Last Dance, it was like, do you really think you're going to learn something in this? It was a 10-hour documentary or whatever it was. And leading into it, I kept saying, you're not going to learn anything from this. That's just not who and what Jordan is. I mean, we got our moments that, you know, we've got highlighted moments in the docuseries for sure. But I'd argue we didn't learn anything in that 10 hours. I don't think we're going to learn anything in this 5, but I'll tell you what it does do, Casey, and like it stood out to me. And Donnie, you were talking about the footage that they have. We've seen the clips of Pac, that we've seen that high school interview before,
right?
You know, maybe we haven't seen this much of it, but we know that's existed. We've seen that video move before. What stood out to me the most, though, is they're playing it in long form, and he's talking about his mom, and he's talking about the Black Panthers. He's 17 years old. He sounded exactly the same at 17 as he did 24. And I'm not talking about his tone of voice or like delivery. I'm talking about in what he's saying and what he's talking about. He was talking about the same things at, 20 and 21 and 22 and 23, 24. He was talking about that stuff at 17 years old. And another thing that really stood out, again, I don't know if it's learning. I don't know if it's watching like with hyper awareness. But I think we had always heard the idea that Pac was born into violence, right? He was born into violence because of what his mother went through. He was born into violence because he was so associated with the Black Panthers, and we all know what they went through. And despite how intellectually well thought out he was, and how well read he was still like the Digital Underground story stood out to me. When he said when I think it was, I can't remember if it was Money B who was telling the story that he got pissed off at a sound guy one day and just went to swing at him. Just like quick, like it didn't escalate. It was just, he was pissed because he didn't feel like he was doing what he was supposed to do. And he went to swing at him.
Yeah.
But his uncle stopped him. And it's just like, man, Pac has always been, the way we talk about Pac, like he's always been those two things, intellectual and violent.
Yeah.
Like he's always been both of those.
Yeah. No, I think, I think if anything, this magnifies everything we know about Tupac. And I guess, the little sort of tidbits, about, just how Layla Steinberg was really instrumental. I mean, I knew that, but to kind of hear her talk more in depth about, how she recognized his passion, early. And then just even like I think he had a homeboy who was like, yeah, I got a friend right now who's better than Rakim, and he's 16 years old. I don't think people understand like how talented, and like you said, Damien, how, articulate and how, just on brand pretty much Tupac was from day one. I mean, his roots to the struggle are so deep and so ingrained in him that that's always sort of been the basis just for his persona, right? And we think of Pac, we think, okay, yeah, he went to performing arts school. He's been exposed to, so many different facets of life, yet still moving through, this just perpetual state of poverty, whether it's New York, Baltimore, Marin City. And that is what I think is, there are two things to me in these two episodes that are really just standouts. He was angry. He was angrier than even I realized, because I don't know. I mean, I always knew Pac. Yeah, he was Pac. He was kind of volatile, he had that duality, the Gemini thing, but it's clear that he was angry. So you talk about when he beat up the sound guy when he was with Digital. So I randomly came across this Chuck D. I think he was on Sway in the Morning, and he was talking about, so when they went on tour in 1990, I can't think of the name of the tour, but Queen Latifah, Kid and Play, Public Enemy was headlining, and Pac, and Digital Underground was there, obviously, and Pac was there, a young Pac and a young Tretch when he was treacherous, and Pac and Tretch running around crazy, and he's just like giving Chuck D all of this praise. And apparently somebody had stole something out of Chuck D's dressing room, and Pac found the guy and proceeded to stomp him out. And Chuck D was like, yo, chill. Like, it's not that serious. Like, like, where's this coming from? It's like, I just want you to know that I'm riding for you, but that, to me, it just comes from a deeper source of like having this chip on your shoulder about life, right? And then, the other thing that we all kind of knew, but it's so, it's just so evident in this documentary, is that Pac was poised to be way bigger than just a rapper and an actor and an entertainer.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like in him,
Yeah, and when you talked about his anger, that's something that jumped out to me as well. And I would like to know what you guys think about this. It's like, I think being from the environment that he was from, with the Feeney and the Panthers and just the revolution, just, you say he was born into violence, and he was, I would also say he was born into a revolution. So he was a revolutionary just by birth. Like
Absolutely.
that's everything about his life, whether it's, the way he looked at, schools, or the way he looked at music or cops or anything, was about a revolution, because that's what he was born into. That's all he really knew, was to be a revolutionary. So it was that. But when you talk about anger, I mean, I think the anger also came from him having these different experiences,
Yeah.
and seeing the same experiences in different places, and be like, man, this is all messed up.
Yeah.
It don't matter where I'm at, whether it's New York, Baltimore, Marin, it don't matter. It's all like everything is messed up. And he couldn't get over it.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't, and I'm not saying he should have got over it, but he could not get past. He's like, man, this is messed up everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's where you would hear him talk about stuff about how poor people like see, he has the famous clip when he's talking about, we've been asking for years,
Mhm.
now we gonna bust down. Like
Yeah.
he angry because he's seen it in different, he's seen the same thing, the same struggle in different parts of the country.
Yeah.
And he's like, man, it's not a East Coast, West Coast, it's everywhere.
It's
Like the whole
everywhere.
country messed up.
Yeah.
And that anger, that chip on his shoulder, is something that he carried, number one, because he is a revolutionary, and number two, because he's seen it with his own eyes as he got older and older.
Right.
And that's the prism that he would look at a lot of this stuff.
Well, it wasn't just seeing it with his young. He as he got older, he saw that from birth. Like
Mhm.
he saw that out the womb. Like that's all he was raised around,
Mhm.
and it never escaped him. And I think that's why it always stayed so sharp on his tongue. He talked the incident with the police is highlighted. The jaywalking incident, which we've all heard about, is highlighted in these first two episodes, and that's like what he talks about.
Yeah.
Do you know what talk show that is? That they were showing clips.
Hell no, where he got the black hat
yeah,
on.
I was like,
never seen
what
that
is
before,
this?
ever?
I could not find. I don't know who that. It had to have been regional, right? It
Yeah,
had to have been
yeah.
like, I don't know if it was
Some
like
Bay
Bay Area
Area.
local or
Yeah.
or whatever it was. I was like,
never
this
seen that
isn't
footage.
Sally. This isn't Ricky. This isn't Jenny.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what this
I
is.
saw the clip
and I
on
couldn't
social
find
media before, and I thought it was something like Sally or Donahue or
Mm-mm.
something like that. And then when I saw it, I was like, nah,
Yeah,
it's
that
not.
Dude had an
host is-
I Love Slayer shirt on in the front. I was like, what is this from?
Yeah, that was unidentifiable. But those are the little things, those are the little gems about this that I love.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
all of this unearthed footage that's coming out, all of these, different interviews, like him on a set of damn, what's the video? Not Brenda's Got a Baby. What's the one where he's got the red Tupac and he's like at the mic? He's like, Harry Connick ain't got nothing on me. It's a Hughes Brothers, one of those.
Is it Trap? It's not Trap.
It's not Trap.
That's the jail one.
I can't think of it.
Shout out to Alan Hughes who told his story too. I wasn't sure if they were going to avoid it.
So
I was like,
listen.
you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
Like you have to talk about it. And
Right.
I thought they handled that really well.
Yeah. So damn, I had a point about the whole okay. So just circling back real quick about Pac having a chip on his shoulder. I think also in that, I think in stages throughout his life, he was born into the struggle. He was born into the revolution. His, godfather was Geronimo Pratt. His stepfather was Matulu Shakur.
Mhm.
His real father was actually a Panther also, who he thought died, and he was lied to about who his real father was. He didn't meet him till later. I think he's interviewed in the next episode. But I think in addition to just being born and you realizing that, this poverty is a uniquely Black problem in America, because you go to these different regions expecting something better, and you get the same shit, if not worse, everywhere. I think in addition to that, the juxtaposition of being like at a Baltimore School of Performing Arts, and your classmates come from, they come from, affluent backgrounds, or they just have, just just family structure that you don't have. They have a security that you don't have. Or even at Tampine High School, he's having an interview, right? You like, he even talks about it. He's like, we can't even pay our rent, and I think there have been moments where, or not moments, but times in his life where he's felt just like he just took a blow from life that he couldn't sort of recover from.
Couldn't get over it.
Even his mom, smoking crack,
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then, seeing so many other Panthers locked up, murdered, and then he got kicked out at 13. So I just think life dealt Pac these blows, and he was resilient enough to continue to pursue his dream because he was obviously immensely talented, but he just couldn't shake, the burden like of that pain. But I
Yeah.
think it also like fueled him.
Well, you talk about the pain, and when I hear you talk, it's different struggles, it's different experiences.
Mhm.
But it reminds me of what we talked about last week with DMX. He could
Yeah.
never escape. Pac could never escape the trauma and the pain
Yeah.
that he had experienced in a number of different points in his life, in his young life,
Mhm.
right? And he just always carried that chip on his shoulder, and it fueled him.
Yeah.
It propelled him to great heights and to be
Yeah.
one of the greatest artists that we've ever seen. But it also played into some of his demise. Not saying he should have been killed, but like just some of the things that happened, like the whole incident allegedly of when he got killed. Like that wasn't rap. That was him just beating the hell out of
It's
a
not
guy.
allegedly,
Yeah.
like it happened. Like
Yeah,
we
like
saw it
that-
on video. Like he
Yeah.
stomped out
Right.
well, that was
blood.
for real, but I like we don't know if the retaliation.
Oh
Was
yeah,
anything.
yeah,
That's
we
what I'm
do.
saying.
Right.
Yeah,
But
we
like
do.
he just,
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
but he just goes and stomps the guy out
Right.
in the
Right.
middle of
Right.
a hotel lot. Like
Yeah.
it was the gift and the
It's
curse.
the
a
Chuck
lot of
D
times.
thing that you were just talking about all over. Had to do with the stolen medallion.
Exactly.
And
I want to
the whole
ask
thing.
you guys though another question.
Thank you.
I want to ask
Clip
you
it,
guys,
Donnie.
how what's Afeni's role in all this, in your guys' opinion? Like, do you think she fueled that fire, tried to mold it into something positive, tried to temper it a little bit, like trying to find different outlets? What do you think after 2 episodes of this, her role in Tupac's upbringing is?
So you said a second ago that relating it to the DMX episode, that Tupac couldn't escape, that trauma and all that. I don't think he wanted to. I don't think he was trying to escape anything. I think he was using that trauma as a way to deliver his message. It's like on a different scale when we do our sports radio show, right? Like I rely on your basketball playing days, your time in college basketball to relay certain game scenarios and game messages and ideas, and instead of just fan talking out your ass, you speak from experience. I think that's what Pac looked at all of that as. I don't even know if that Pac looked at it as trauma. He looked at it as experience, his experience, his Black experience, and he was going to relay that to the world. It's like that the unknown talk show that we were talking about. He looks at this woman and like, who are you to tell me about my Black experience?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't care how many books you've read. Like I live this every day.
Right.
Like he wasn't trying to escape anything because he wanted to share it. And what role did Afeni play in that? I think she shared her experiences with him, and that further fueled him. I think everything that we know Pac is, that's what Afeni was.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Afeni's not stomping out a crip at the MGM, but like she's using her anger and her frustration. She's using the Panther 21 and being pregnant in jail and all of those things as a way to tell her son, you're the messenger, right? Here's the message. I live the message. You're living the message. It's not an accident that your biggest run-ins with the law have all involved police. That's because of who we are. That's because of being associated with a Black Panther. They knew before Tupac was a teenager that he was born into a family of Black Panthers. And there's no way they wasn't watching that. There's no way that all of these run-ins, whether it's the jaywalking incident or the undercover police officer, this isn't all coincidental. I think it all ties to the Black Panthers, and that's Afeni.
And this is a little different, a lot different than what Pac and Afeni and the Black Panthers went through. But I remember, because you talk about Pac not wanting to escape it, not wanting to maybe even deal with it, everything that was going on. And I remember me personally, once again, I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but I didn't have my dad around my entire life. Like I knew him. I would see him from time to time. It was all good. I knew he loved me, but he just not involved whatsoever. I was involved with his family and all this other stuff. And I just lived life. Like that was life. That's what it was. That's what it was. And I lived life, lived it, did everything that I did, played basketball, went to school. It was me and my mom. I lived it. Everything was good. And then when I was about 23, 24 years old, I was at a gym and I was working at a gym, and these fathers would come in with their sons every single day, and they would help them basketball every day. And not till I was about 24, 25 years old, I was like, oh, well, what the hell did I miss out on?
Yeah.
Like, damn,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily how life is supposed to go,
Yeah.
how I lived it. Like, what? Damn, did I just miss out on a whole hell of a lot? I didn't realize it because it didn't matter. I was just living life. I was just going. This is the cards that was dealt. This is what it is. I just lived it.
Right.
And when you say that, I think about that with Pac. Pac was just moving. Pac was just moving. And he never, I don't know if he ever had the opportunity. Because like I said, I was 24 years old. He died when he was, 23, 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he ever had the opportunity to sit back and be like, damn, like I got a lot that happened to me.
Yeah.
And I need to address what's going on in my life.
Absolutely.
Never had the opportunity. So like that's the first thing that came to my mind when you said he didn't want to. Maybe he didn't have the time to like take a step back and be like, you know what? I got anger issues.
Yeah.
Like that's not okay.
Yeah, so just relating your story about your father being absent, I definitely think I think it's a big part of Pac's life because in so many interviews, I think it's the one where he's at the gun range where he's talking about how he gauged his manhood, and it was from several different people in his circle, but it was never from that one source who was his real father. Yeah, he had Matulu Shakur, but he got sent away. His relationship with him was primarily over the phone, and they tried to stop that. They talked about, right? He would say he would try to get the game from the pimps, the pushers, the dealers. But I'm sure that void was very, very prevalent throughout his life, feeling like, he just didn't have that. So, he said, Afeni was his mother and his father, right? And she did give him the message. But I think she also gave him the reality that your destiny is predetermined in this society already, and it's up to you to break that perception that they have of you however you see fit. And then to see his hero sort of just lose herself, right? She lost herself with crack, and I'm sure just the poverty that they were dealing with. I think it put him in a peculiar place because you asked earlier, what her role was. I think Pac was very much absorbing all of it, mostly what Afeni did. And I think her thing was education, being acutely aware of your surroundings. And if nothing else, know that, you're equipped with these tools and you're not going to be a statistic, or at least I don't want you to be, right? It's sad and unfortunate Pac ultimately became one, but I think her planting these seeds was for him to continue. He was going to be the new chairman of the new Panthers, the new African Panthers. Like that was, if he didn't get signed, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to resurrect the Panthers, like in the Bay Area. So that's totally Afeni, right? But I think the anger, like it's almost like music was cathartic for him because he needed some way to exercise that pain in a way that wasn't stomping people out or just, losing his temper over anything. Because I feel like he walked around with that, and his father not being present and sort of grasping, when you're a black man in America and you are a statistic of, coming from a single parent household, like you live with that. You know what I'm saying? Like I wasn't raised with my biological father. I was lucky to have a man come in and, fill that void. But I could have been, I could have been my reality too, So I think these are all the things that were compounded in his life, but he had his outlet. He had his creative outlet. You know what I mean? It's just, it feels unfortunate, to say the least, that he couldn't escape the things that sort of, plagued him emotionally,
I'm curious to see where they go in terms of the direction of this, because you have, I can't help but think of that, because we there's the impending sexual assault case that's going to hit one of these episodes, and that then that's where you're going to start getting the clips of him spitting on reporters and doing kind of, you're going to get that wilder side of Pac. Then you'll get the Death Row Tupac. But I can't help but think about those MTV awards. The last one that he was alive for, the famous one, was Snoop in in the gray suit, the giant medallion, and there's that I think it's an off camera clip. I don't know if it's on I don't know if it aired as part of the interview. But it's the one where he's talking about he's talking to MTV, and he's like, you guys need to do a better job in handling this situation with us and Bad Boy and Stupid. Like, I understand we have a responsibility, but you're the media, and you're fueling this, and you're firing this, and you're kind of turning it into something it's not. Again, I understand we have a responsibility, but so do you. So this was days before he was killed, and you see that level-headedness where he's almost at the point where he realizes this whole thing is kind of
getting out of control.
It's gotten out of control, and you have a responsibility. And the Kevin Powell's and the vibes and the sources, y'all have a responsibility here. We have ours. We'll do better, but you need to do better too. And you just think about that like level-headedness in that discussion, which, by the way, that's a discussion you can have today. That was how many, 27 years ago? Like, Pac's been dead longer than he was actually alive at this point.
That's crazy.
Like, you go all the way back to, and you realize that is something he was saying back in 1996. That's something people are saying today, talking to media about having responsibilities. A lot of the things Pac talks about in the first 2 episodes of this documentary, they translate today, whether he's talking about Black people or the clip I'm talking about, which wasn't on these 2 episodes, but talking to the media. Like, all of that stuff plays true in 2023, but it flies in the face of the he's crazy narrative. That clip right there, days before he's killed, shows dude is stable. And he's still level-headed, and he can still discuss things the same way he did when he was 17, 18. He could talk about the same things that he was rapping on over that Rakim freestyle. Like, I wish Pac had hooked up with Common and Mos Def instead of Digital Underground. Like, what could he have brought us if he hooked up with the so-called conscious rappers versus what he called the party rappers?
But see, that's the thing though. That's the thing that always perplexes me about Pac. It's almost like he didn't want to lean into his intellectualism. You know what I'm saying? It's just like Menace to Society.
But he did. He just did it differently.
He did, but he did it in a way that he always wanted you to know he was real. It's like Menace to Society. He didn't want to play smart brother. He wanted to play something that he felt like was more authentic. But why not lean into something more positive, more intellectual? And it don't have to be,
and to that point, this is the same thing I'm thinking about. Because, like you said, I think he said that off camera. Say it on camera.
Well, he said it on camera. And the last thing he said was, we both need to use greater restraint. So there absolutely was a balance and a level-headedness about him. But I feel like in the moments at the performance that he did, the last live performance that he did at House of Blues, with when Suge and all them got on stage, and Snoop, that was at the height of, and I feel like that would have been a great opportunity to get on the mic and say, this started between 2 people, and now this has escalated into something that is way beyond what it was intended to be. And I feel like there were moments when Pac had, so I get what you're saying, Kenny. He did say this on camera, but he didn't say it in a place where it was going to be received by the people that needed to be received. There's even a documentary. I mean, not a documentary. There's an interview, an MTV interview. I can't remember, this white dude, VJ. I can't remember, but this is on Tupac Resurrection, where he's talking about he wants to do something with the Wu-Tang. He wants to start a Death Row East, and that never got any airplay for
Mhm,
real.
mhm.
You know, there was never any indication that he wanted to do anything related.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Those kind of things, it might have been too late in the game for it to even be considered real,
Right.
because I think at that point he had just helped to fuel this thing so much that it just got just way out of hand and way out of proportion. You know what I mean?
No, you're right. Right. Both of you guys are right.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I can find. I wanted to find that clip because
Because he said, I think in the clip, didn't he say? He said, "You're right." He did say it on camera. He was like, "Of course, I don't hate all the East Coast or
Yeah,
nothing like
yeah,
that." It's
yeah.
when I do remember
Yeah.
him saying that on camera. Now that I think about it,
Yeah. And he's
But,
like, we both got to use greater restraint. And even his aunt was saying, because I think Alan Hughes asked the question, what was Pac bipolar? And did he have multiple personalities? It's like, hell no. He didn't. These are just different facets of who he was as a person.
Mhm.
It's like his relatability to women. I think
Mhm.
Money B was talking about how he could like
Mhm.
play the character
Mhm.
of a player, but become what a woman wanted him to be in their eyes,
Mhm.
you know, because he could get into character. So
Mhm.
he could get into a very introspective and intellectual mode where he would have a civil conversation with you if
Mhm.
that was like the vibe. Like
Mhm.
Carl Kanai talks about this when he and Pac linked, they would have these very deep, very intellectual conversations just about black businesses and you know, he didn't charge him anything, right?
Mhm.
And it was very level-headed. All the while he's writing a script while he's having this conversation with Carl Kanai. So Pac was absolutely level-headed. He wasn't always just loose cannon,
Right.
you know, short-tempered.
And it is, and it completely escaped me as we're having this conversation. That's literally how the documentary starts. They talk about that shooting with the officers who were
Yeah,
beating up the black
exactly.
dude, and then they go to the room, and Pac's like, "Y'all got to hear this song,"
And he's calm.
and it's "Dear Mama."
And it's Dear Mama. As the cops are
Yeah,
banging on
right.
the door.
That's we're having this. We just had a 20-minute discussion about the very first thing that's covered in this documentary, which it speaks to. It speaks to the multi layers of what Tupac Shakur was.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure.
But again, it's an incident that started with cops.
Yeah. Yeah. And him being so triggered that he had to
Mhm,
get on
right.
one knee as a marksman and hit them from 30 yards away.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like he had to go, like they were gone. You know what I mean? He could have just got in the car. Nobody wanted to give him the gun. He
Mhm.
went around and got it himself, which is why he couldn't stand up and shoot. He had to get on one knee and aim and fire. Right? He couldn't let that go.
Mhm.
You know, so that's a part of the thing. He couldn't let shit go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even he was mad at Snoop when he died. He was mad at
And
Dre.
Dre.
He was mad at Snoop because Snoop said, you know, he messed with Bad Boy. He wasn't mad at Biggie and Puff. And of course, Pac was seething about that.
Right.
Mhm.
Couldn't let that go. So it was just like Pac couldn't let these things go.
Couldn't let it go.
And that's a slippery slope, man. That'll
once-
catch up to you.
Once again, the fateful night. He couldn't let whatever happened to Orlando
Exactly.
Anderson go.
Mhm.
He had to go find. Oh, he there?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go get. Like to a certain degree, wasn't nobody bothering nobody at that
Right.
time. He's like, nope. I gotta go do this.
Yeah.
We gotta go do this.
Which the one thing like Pac was a gangbanger.
Not at all.
Right.
Like Pac was not in a gang.
Nope.
Right.
But you get associated with people
Yeah,
who
gang
are,
affiliated.
and now,
Yeah.
which I think was the title of his movie. No, that was gang related.
Gang related, but still, yeah, gang related. I mean, we know Suge was deep in them Pyrus, or
Mhm.
you know what I mean. So he had to.
Yeah, what was the club? 662.
Yeah,
Well, like,
yeah.
that's what it is.
And he had to sort of assimilate to that lifestyle and to show that he was a rider. He had to be down for whatever Suge had going on. Now he was taking that on.
Yeah.
You know, and that, you know, it's just when you think about it, it's just so sad that there weren't more people around him with his best interest at heart. Even though you probably couldn't tell him much, I'm sure there was Mo Preem, his stepbrother, you know, his sister. I wonder if they interview her in this documentary. I don't know.
Well, that reminds me. I mean, we bring it back to kind of Dear Mama. Maybe this is something that I'm sure we're going to get later episodes, but I wonder and not blaming her. I'm just really curious, like, where was Afeni in all this, and
Yeah.
where because we see it in Kanye's documentary, right, where it seemed like Kanye was always kind of Kanye.
Yeah.
He, like, with his mentality or whatever, and he was always kind of that. The one person where he would listen to this person and just calm down would be Donda.
Yeah, his mom.
When he was
tethered
around
him.
Donda, he was just Donda's son.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And you wonder if Afeni, when everything was going haywire, had the ability or had the ear of Pac to be like, hey.
Yeah. Yeah, his
You
mother
gotta
tethered
kinda-
him to reality,
Right.
where everyone else sort of
Right.
inflated his ego.
And I mean, like I said, I'm sure they'll talk about it later in the doc.
Well, there's a book, Holla If You Hear Me, by Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, about Tupac. They touch on Tupac's
we got
relationship.
I got connects that we got to talk to.
So they
Dyson.
briefly touch on, and I haven't read the entire book, but there's excerpts about Tupac's relationship, and they even talk about it in the documentary when Afeni is out of rehab and she's like working for Pac. I think, I don't know, not as a publicist, something. She's doing something for him. And they have like a friendship relationship. And it's in Tupac Resurrection too, where he is like, yeah, it started out as mother and son. It's like, you're my mother, I'm your son. And then it became Dictator Little Country, he said. And that was in his teenage years. And then she eventually kicked him out. And then while he was trying to figure his life out, she was trying to figure her life out. She had to go to rehab in Connecticut. And then when they came back together, Pac was a star. So he's a man now. And your mom is still your mom.
Right.
But the way it was framed in so many different things that I've seen is that they were like friends, sort of. So when you have that kind of relationship with your mother, I don't know if it's the same as a mother and son relationship,
Right.
And there's even I think it's Tupac Resurrection, where there's a card, it's like a birthday card. It was Pac's last birthday. He turned 20, he was 25 when he passed, right? Yeah, he was 25. And on the card, it's from his mom, and it says, Tupac, your sensitivity is a blessing and a burden. And that to me just indicates it was probably at a point where he couldn't sort of be pulled back enough to be like, okay, you need to just decompress and just chill. I don't think anyone could really reach him in that way at that point.
That's one thing that we didn't get in the first two episodes that I'm sure we'll get as this thing builds to a conclusion is, we're getting a little bit of a backstory on Pac, right? We're getting, a deeper backstory on Afeni than we've gotten previous docs. But what we haven't got yet is the intersect of the two. Now, we can draw our own conclusions, like talking about Pac being born into violence and, the Panthers and how all of that influenced. But what they haven't done on the screen yet is merge those two together, kind of like they did in the Yeezus documentary with Donda and Kanye. Like they haven't merged together. So I'm looking forward to seeing when that happens and how that happens.
Yeah.
Because after one episode, as played the first one, was like, man, there's a lot less Afeni than this is not what I thought. And then the second one, you got a lot more of Afeni in that second one.
Yeah.
And Tupac continue to evolve. It's like they're telling two stories on two different timelines. And at some point in this 5-part series, the two have to meet to really pull this thing together.
Definitely.
So I'm looking forward to seeing how that happens. I don't think we'll do an episode like after every release. We certainly can. But I know we're going to cover the rest of this series.
Yeah.
We're going to do another episode. And there's, if Corners of the Culture, by the grace of God, Corners of the Culture is around for a while. There's 3, 4, 5 Pac episodes. It's just like the beefs, there's 3, 4 episodes when you talk about hip hop beefs. We haven't even touched on the Wu-Tang Clan past Wu, where, Nas is good for more. Jay is good for God knows how many. So, Pac is another one of those ones where, shoot, we could do a whole episode just on the influence of Tupac. Today, I couldn't help, man, when he hit that Rakim rap. The first thing I thought of, this will infuriate people, so don't clip this and put it on social media. The first thing I thought of was, man, that Pac wouldn't work today. he too smart.
Yeah.
Ain't nobody listening to that. Did y'all hear what he just said? Nah, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear less intellectually stimulating,
Right.
thing like that. Man, the delivery on the record was flawless, just like incredible. I had never seen it before. It was the first time I had seen the Rakim rap. But my first thought was, man, they'd be clowning Pac today. They wouldn't let Pac talk like that today.
There's only one. There's only one of them like that today. I shouldn't say that. There's more of them, but one that's made it to that height. And that's Kendrick. Kendrick found a way to cut through all that nonsense and say, I'm gonna talk about different stuff than what we're hearing. But the thing with Kendrick, and this is what Pac might have been able to do today, Kendrick just talked about his life, and it was relatable to people who were living the same life. Not everybody was a gangbanger. You might have grew up in a gang-infested environment, but that didn't mean you were a gangbanger. And Kendrick spoke to those people, and he was dope. And Pac, it's kind of what Pac did a little bit. Pac was like, I'm just a guy. I'm not really a gang member. I'm not really a Panther. I'm a black man in America, and these are my experiences.
Associated with gangs and associated with the Panthers.
Right.
But like, you bring up Kendrick, and I think Kendrick is like a direct disciple, a direct influence of Tupac. I mean, to pimp a butterfly was, I think, the clearest indication of that, the way he tied all of that in, and he's like having a conversation with Pac throughout the whole thing, right? So I think just the idea of being the good kid in the mad city and having to move in that space, it's like where Pac failed, Kendrick succeeded, right? Because he could give you deep, introspective, intellectual Kendrick, but make it digestible for the general public. So like a great example of that to me, one of the greatest songs ever is Swimming Pools. And on the surface, it feels like a song about drinking, right? But it's really a song about the perils of doing anything in excess.
Right.
But you could play it in a club and everybody gonna vibe to it and probably get drunk to it, you know? So I think where you say Pac would have been well received if he was spitting a Rakim flow now, well, I think Pac knew that, which is why he, could make How Do You Want It and
I Get Around.
I Get Arounds, and he could do more commercially sort of accepted music, you know what I'm saying? But I think if more of the intellectual Pac was infused in his music, it would have had an even, I don't know if it would have had a greater reach, but I think it would have made his catalog, you know how they say, oh, well, Pac wasn't that lyrical and he's not this and that. Well, he was that lyrical, but I think he had to dumb it down, at a certain point, especially by the Death Row years. Tupacalypse Now was a very intellectual album. It was very introspective, and it was all about the struggle of the young black male, and it was very articulate, but it was angry.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But as the albums progressed, it got more into the, thug passions, and you know what I'm saying? So I think Kendrick is a great example of the influence.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Okay, that's number 3.
At its core, you talk about Pac being angry. Pac, not being able to get past stuff. At his core, do you think Pac was angry that this was the life that he was born into? Do you think like he wanted, like you mentioned earlier, like he never like tried to escape it? But do you think at his core, he's like, man, I wish I just
let me just
had
say
a
this real
two-parent
quick.
home and was a regular kid.
Just touching on what Damien was saying earlier about that, because I wanted to come back to that too. So the part about not wanting to escape, that I don't know if he wanted to or not, but I do know he wanted to be the conduit for his people to escape it. But if he was going to be the scapegoat or be the martyr or whatever,
He was willing to take.
He was willing to take that, like a Malcolm X was willing to die, for his people, kind of thing, or just in a different context, from this modern era that we're in, and he's lived all these experiences, I think the fact that he could say that, he lived this life authentically was sort of like he wore it as a badge of honor. But the purpose was to get, it's like in a deposition. It's like they're trying to pin the kid killing a cop on him. And he's like, no, that was not the message behind the song. The message was to think, use your head. And that was his whole plight, right? But if he was standing firm in the struggle, then yeah, he was going to wear that proudly, but the idea was for all of us to sort of elevate out of that and see that we have the power to do so, so I think I just think he got so wrapped up in just trying to, I don't know, it's like it was counterproductive to evolution too, though, like the evolution of him as an artist. It's almost like he went backwards a little bit, but still remaining true to speaking truth to power and representing a young black male in America.
What do you think, Dave?
No, I don't think he was upset about the circumstances he was born into, because I think it's all he knew. And because it's all he knew, he embraced it. And he wanted to be Fred Hampton, right? He wanted to be those revolutionaries that he read about and heard stories about and talked to, his family about, like that he took on that responsibility. It's what he knew, and he had the ability to deliver a message, so he was going to deliver it, whether he was just a young community organizer or a dude who appeared on whatever his walk of life, or a world famous rapper, actor.
Yeah,
he was going to deliver that message, because he was going to have the form and he was going to deliver the message. So I'm going to say no.
I asked the question. I don't know the answer. I think there is a part of him that was like, I wish I didn't. This is what I was born into. Sometimes I wish I was born into something else.
Okay, so it's one thing that I don't think a lot of people know about in the special features of Tupac Resurrection. There are some really good interviews in that. There's the one with Jada's crying, talking about their relationship, and there's an interview with his aunt. And I'm mad she wasn't featured in. I'm glad she's featured in Dear Mama, because her story needs to be told, her perspective needs to be told, and they may touch on this. So I don't want to, give away no spoilers, but I think after Pac got out of the hospital and he got accused of rape after he had gotten shot 5 times, his aunt found him in a room with the words "fuck the world" on his forehead and a gun to his head, where he wanted to take his own life. Now, this has never been widely publicized, but in the special features of Tupac Resurrection, she talks candidly about this, him just not wanting to be here. So even though I agree, Damien, I don't think he wished he had another life. I think he felt like he was a soldier for this, just hard truth that he was living. I'm sure there were times where he felt like, God damn, like, why me? I'm sure any person with any amount of burden would feel that. But overall, yeah, I don't think
he would trade it in.
Yeah, I don't think he would trade, because it would then change who he was as a person.
Right.
But just something like that, because I was blown away, and I forget about that. When I first saw that, I'm sure it's on YouTube. I'm sure you can YouTube it, but yeah, he wanted to take his own life at one point.
Well, we'll see if that story develops over the next handful of episodes of Dear Mama, and of course, once those are all wrapped.
Can I just say one more thing before we wrap up?
You're gonna have to say it quick though.
Real quick. Tupac is so influential that Allen Hughes, who Pac whooped his ass on the set of a movie.
Tupac didn't whoop his ass. 10 other motherfuckers whooped his
That
ass.
too. But Pac was the catalyst for it. That Allen Hughes would still make this documentary.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, they have a relationship though too, which I don't think a lot of people were super aware of. That's how those brothers started.
Yeah.
Like in that,
as friends.
In directing music videos, and it went south. On the set of Menace to Society.
Is Rivera going to be in the Jay-Z document?
Oh, okay. We appreciate you so much. Jay-Z's powerful enough. My guess is he would be.
Right.
We appreciate you so much for being with us. Download, subscribe, share with your friends. Check out the dopeones.com for some incredible merch. Head over to DLoandKC.com as well. And we'll see you back here next week on Corners of the Culture.